Today I have something a little bit different for you. We are going to talk about this flexible resin and see if I can print a fully wearable cosplay. For this project I used files from Krotek for the armour, props and the accessories, so I will leave those links below in case you wanted to print yourself. So since I only have one FDM printer and multiple resin printers, the obvious choice for me for this project was resin. I have never printed a wearable outfit before, so I needed to have a little look around at my options. This is when I came across this flexible resin from Yusu. I grabbed a bottle of their flexible tough resin and I ran a little test print with it to see if this might be suitable. Once I was happy, I ordered a bulk lot of the stuff and we got to some printing. Before we actually print, we need to prep the files. And to get my print plates prepped, I first needed to work out scaling for the pieces. So I loaded up my avatar in Armorsmith Designer. I found this software super useful figuring out sizes, and I use it for some commissions too, creating avatars based on customers' measurements. You can basically just drag in the STL files and you can do a little snap to the body to make sure that the pieces are going to fit you specifically. I did find a couple of the STLs weren't shrinking to fit properly, but even in those circumstances it was useful to manually adjust and check if the fit was going to be good. Once I knew what percentage I needed to scale my pieces to, I got about supporting the files ready for printing. I printed this entire armour set using my M3 Max, which I run 2 of, and some of the smaller pieces on a Mighty 12K. We're going to do a full price breakdown of this cosplay at the end of the video, but for now, just know that this was 26 plates, which came to over 600 printing hours. This resin was actually a lot easier to work with than I expected. So long as you slow your printing speeds right down, you'll be fine. This flexi resin from Yusu was a really interesting find, and before I started this costume, I had no idea that a flexible resin was even available. When you watch the print happening, you'll notice that the parts do kind of flex as they pull away from the fet, and this is where slowing down those printing speeds is very important. It's also really thick, so it takes a little bit longer for the resin to flow back in after the build plate is lifted. With everything printed, it was time to get some pieces glued together into their appropriate sections. This material was a little tricky to work with, and after testing a few glues, I actually found the best way to secure the pieces was a mixture of contact adhesive and CT glue. The contact adhesive wasn't quite the strongest on this material, but the CT glue really helped to strengthen the bond, whilst the contact adhesive really helped to keep the connected pieces somewhat flexible. Often when I need pieces to glue, I will use like a clamp to keep them together, but I found that with this material, the clamp was maybe a bit too tight and it was distorting the pieces, so I instead opted to use tape just on the back of the pieces. With all the sections assembled, it was time to lay out the pieces and see if I had anything missing. Okay, so we are nearly there with printing Orin, so I'm going to do a little try on. We're going to see what pieces I have left to print. There's quite a lot to this costume and I think I've got most of it. I think I'm maybe just missing like a piece or two. But let's just do a little try on, make sure everything's okay, make sure the sizes are right. We have 1 week until the event now, so not long to go. I also took this opportunity to check the fit. Once I knew I was happy with the pieces, I wanted to get some of the gaps filled as well. For this, I used a flexi foam filler. All throughout this project, it was important to remember that I wanted to keep it all flexible so that it was comfortable to wear and it would all move with me. This flexi filler was perfect. I just gently spread it across the gaps, and I will say that this filler is supposed to be sandable, but I didn't put this to the test. Since Orin's armour is textured, I instead lent into this with the filler. To avoid risking any cracking of paint, I again had to find a flexible option. I grabbed a bottle of this flexible acrylic paint in red, but it was quite thick and it was a little on the pale side, so I created a mix in a separate bottle with a bit of extra crimson acrylic to adjust the colour and some airbrush thinner to thin it down as I wanted it to go smoothly through my airbrush. I went through and gave every piece a base coat. This paint doesn't require any priming either, so this went straight onto the cured resin pieces. It gave pretty good coverage first round, which I was pleasantly surprised by. My airbrush of choice for big projects like this is the Swallowtail from Gallery, and I used the 0.7 needle. This allows me to give a wide coverage in one go. After the first cycle, I went back through and gave everything a second coat using the same mix of paint. Now, whilst I'm going through this long painting stage, I'm going to admit something to you. I haven't finished Baldur's Gate 3. I haven't even met Orin. I know, I'm a fraud. When we began this business a couple of years ago, BG3 statues were our biggest sellers. Parker has definitely spent more hours painting the characters than he has put into the game. It was actually him painting all these statues that led us to starting a playthrough in the first place. Whilst it was on our radar, it wasn't really in our to play list. Anyway, about a year of him painting statues and us occasionally getting an hour or two of playing here and there, I started the props and cosplay accessories aspect of the business. And wouldn't you know it, BG3 was once again our best seller. I have now made so many BG3 props. Between all of the BG3 projects from Parker and I, Orin quickly became my favourite character design. I just love my creepy girlies. Anyway, drop me a comment and berate me, not really because I'm sensitive, for not finishing this game and tell me why I should get back to it. Anyway, back to the painting. So for the final coat, I use a much darker shade to get in some of these shadows. The airbrush booth is a bit blinding, but the effect will be more evident in the later sections when we start attaching some accessories. However, now also might be a good time to show you a piece of my costume in the flesh. So this is one of my back pieces, and as you can see, it's so flexible. It bends all the way over, and it also just goes back to its printed shape. Next up is the bodysuit. It's a lot of body paint if you wanted to go that direction with Orin, so like most people, I opted to grab myself one of these seamless bodysuits from We Love Colour. Overall, I really like it. The seamlessness of it is very impressive. It does also have great stretch. I get nervous of one size fits all type clothing as I'm never really sure if it's going to fit, but this one fitted perfectly. I'll list the exact one I'm wearing down below so you can check it out for yourself. To get it painted up, you could suit up a mannequin or a dress form, but I really wanted to make sure it's painted at the right stretch, and I just so happen to have a professional painter as a husband, so I recruited a helping hand for this part. We started a test section on the arm where I knew it was going to be covered by the armour. Parker actually used the Ben Nye Pro Colour makeup that I planned to use on my face so that we would have some sort of decent colour match between face makeup and bodysuit. He applied it with a paintbrush before going back in to fill some places with a bit more of solid painting. Now I'm going to let some time-lapse play, but I'm also going to tell you a story, because here we got disrupted. The doorbell went. We both totally forgot that we had booked a boiler service. So Parker, being the gentleman he is, went to go deal with the plumber whilst I continued hiding in the lounge. But then the plumber needed something outside, which meant coming through the lounge and there was nowhere left to hide. I came face to face with a stranger looking like this. I really wasn't sure whether it would be best to explain, but the plumber seemed to take the path of just ignoring the situation he was faced with, so I felt I had to do the same. Instead, we just held a conversation like it was no big deal. But once that was over, we cracked on with the bodysuit some more. Parker then used the airbrush to blend out the painted in lines. It became quite a big job and I had to take a seat whilst he finished my legs. Ultimately, this ended up taking a total of 3 hours, although maybe more like 2.5 hours of painting since we were interrupted. And the final little step is to add some realism to this bodysuit with some fake nails on the hands and the feet. Now, attaching the armour pieces to this bodysuit proved to be a lot more complicated than I expected. I thought Velcro was going to be the best method, but it just wasn't working. I had managed to get such a good fit that when I would pull an armour piece up my leg, it would just get attached to the Velcro pieces at the bottom, or maybe the tooth sections would get caught up in the bodysuit. So anyway, I had to give up on that. Next, I thought maybe magnets, but when I got to the stage of trying to connect the armour to the bodysuit, it was literally the night before I was supposed to leave for con, and I did not have very many magnets in the house. I was also concerned that it may be a bit pinchy and sort of a bit heavy and drag the fabric down, but I don't know because I didn't really have enough magnets to find out. So I started to think about just gluing it on, and this was okay. I started the process and I found that the contact adhesive was working quite well, connecting the pieces to my bodysuit. However, by this point I knew that Parker was no longer going to be able to come to con with me, and it was very tricky to get this on and off with all of the armour pieces attached to the bodysuit. So I was in a bit of a pickle. In the end, I decided to wake up very early for con and glue myself completely into the outfit before leaving. Thankfully, this did work and it stayed in place for most of the day. And a super big thank you to the friend that helped me get out of it again before my 5-hour drive back home. When I cosplay Orin again, I think I'm going to remove all of the glue and instead try out the magnet idea. If you have a better idea of how I could secure these pieces to my bodysuit, I would love to hear it, so drop a comment below. Whilst she isn't the most comfortable to wear, I really did enjoy being Orin, so I want to find a way to get this on a bit easier. Time to move on to some accessories. All the accessory pieces were printed in Conjure Rigid resin. The gems for the headpiece more specifically use the clear resin. First of all, I start by assembling the gems. For these blue ones, a blue backing is really helpful to make the colour pop, so I use a blue paint marker before gluing the gems into place. Next, we lay out the rear half of the headpiece. I use my mini drill to get the holes in the most appropriate places and use jump rings to connect them. Once all these pieces are connected, I grab the front pieces where the gems should hopefully be dry now, and this little guy needs glue into the front. Then these two pieces at a bit of an angle so that he's standing upright. I usually put this bit aside, leant up against somewhere to help him stay upright until he is dry. The front section on top needs more gluing, with these being the pieces that go together. The side sections require some silver chain, so I measured out on my head to see how much chain I wanted to drape. Next, the front gem with these two comma-shaped pieces. They are quite delicate, so I had to be very careful inserting these jump rings. Next, the red gem fits into the diamond frame and connects to the smaller end of the comma. Finally, these small dangly bits, which are again quite delicate, just need to be attached. Now the headpiece is all finished and ready for a wearing. I attached this headpiece to my wig by using transparent thread and I just stitched it on. Moving on to the belt piece, and I first had to use the drill again to make holes appropriate for jump rings. Once I joined up the main length of the belt, I worked on this front dangly section where I used fishing wire to thread the balls through before gluing them to the back of these discs. Once left to dry, I connected each newly created chain to the front of the belt. Next, for accessories, these small arrow pieces need to go down the front of the torso. The snail pieces that house a blue gem also have a chain between the two that goes across her chest. So I first drilled in holes and used jump rings to attach chain across the torso. Then I glued the gems in place before gluing these pieces into place all down the torso, leaving us with a finished piece like this. Now the final batch of accessories are on the wig itself, so let's get into this. So I purchased this 65-inch wig from Webster Wigs. Since I know my wig styling skills are pretty mid, so I knew I would struggle too much building the wig myself like a lot of other people have done when creating this cosplay. I opted for a super long, ready-made wig, and it just so happened to be the perfect length for my height. Now, I wasn't messing when I said my wig styling skills are no good, and I did not even know where to start with braiding her hair. I ended up getting advice from one of my friend's sisters, who gave me a little demonstration when we were all on a short holiday together. So with the wig now fully brushed, I just began braiding. I am just gonna say I'm gonna need to redo this wig, because the place I shot this cosplay was so windy, and the wig is now a state. I think I needed to do the tedious process of crimping to help keep its shape and using some strong hairspray to also assist the hold. Since I did this wig back in summer last year, I have expanded my wig styling skills lately. Most recently, I finished this Jinx wig. And with this one, the crimping and the hairspray really helped. So when Orin does come out again, she'll be getting a fix up. Once I got going, the braiding went quite quick, and it was all helped with a visit from my pup Eris, of course. As expected, the braid was very heavy, so I also opted to stitch in additional combs to the wig cap. I was very thankful for this on the day I wore it, because it is so heavy it does start to slide back. I am also a terrible planner, and because this was for a deadline, I actually found myself doing the final touches on this wig in the hotel room the night before con. So I will instead tell you what I did to finish it. I hooked the end of the braid around and tied it so it had a bit of a loop, kind of like this. I then used cable ties to secure the big end of the braid to this looped hair. As for the decorations all down her braid, I actually just hot glued them into place. Apologies for no demonstration of me doing this part. I will try to quit the con crunching. Probably won't. Before we get to a reveal, now is the time to find out how much this all cost. So as I said earlier, the main outfit was 26 plates and total 616 hours of printing. My M3 Max fits about 500ml in a vat, and yes, I did also have a couple of print fails. So I ended up using about 18 bottles of resin. I got this resin through Amazon, and I did take advantage of their subscribe and save to get the cheaper price. So this resin cost me £29.87 per bottle. Let's just call it £30 a bottle. Now this is the part where I'm going to ask Parker to mute. Okay, so for the rest of you, that comes to a total of £540. Yeah, quite an expensive outfit. Now I also had props and accessories that went with this outfit. I used a whole bottle of clear red ABS-like for the blades on each of my props, which cost $14.99 at the time with the subscribe and save deal again. Then for the accessories and the two handles of my props, I used a whole bottle of Conjure Rigid. At this time, this cost $29.99, but they have had a lot of better deals on, so if you wanted to try it, now might be a good chance. So this now brings us to a total of £584.98 for all of the printed pieces. But we are not quite there. The last two expenses for this project are my bodysuit and the wig. The bodysuit I used was the light grey seamless bodysuit from We Love Colours, and at the time, this cost me £85.51, including the shipping. At the time of purchase, the wig cost me £128.55. This now brings our overall cost to £799.04. Yeah, I shouldn't have done this cost breakdown really. I'm just here to once again break the myth that it is cheaper to make your own cosplays. I did, however, have a lot of fun making this for a couple of weeks, so I think it's worth it. Anyway, let's lift the mood back up a bit and let's take a look at my finished cosplay. Now I hoped to reveal this finished cosplay with some video, but unfortunately Parker came down with shingles at the time and he was going to be my cameraman. So I did go by myself to this con. But I was lucky to get to hang out with lots of mutuals, so I wasn't totally alone. This was at Secretcon, where they held an event at Horton Castle. It was such a perfect place to shoot Orin, and the dungeons in particular were made for her. We also fitted in some shoots with a whole BG3 group, so a big thanks to all of the photographers and cosplayers I got to work with. I actually made another cosplay with this resin at the same time, so here's a little look at me shooting Shar at this convention too. If you're into cosplay or photography, I highly recommend these events. They're fully focused on the creativity side of cosplay, and you get to meet so many amazing people. Hopefully I'll be able to get myself to another one towards the end of the year. I have left some usernames of some of the photographers whose work you're seeing at the moment, in case you wanted to see any more of their work. If you have enjoyed this little project, or if you have any questions, please do drop a comment below. I'm also curious to know if anyone else has tried out flexible resin, and if so, what for. Finally, a big thank you to all of our patrons on screen. I know this isn't the usual type of video you get from us, but it's still printing and painting, so I hope it's still been interesting. I'd love to know if you are interested in occasional cosplay videos as well. In fact, I am currently working on a pretty big FDM project. Thank you all for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.